Moloch, the god that still feeds. There is an ancient name that echoes like a war drum beneath the thin veneer of civilization, a vibration felt in the marrow of history's darkest bones. Moloch, not merely a deity consigned to dusty tomes or archaeological fragments, but a principle, a devourer etched into the very foundations of forgotten empires, a furnace fueled by innocence, a god demanding the ultimate currency, life itself. His name may be ancient, resonant with the smoke of Canaanite valleys and Carthaginian pyres, but his appetite is horrifyingly contemporary. For Moloch never truly died. He shed his bronze skin, stepped out of the flames, and donned 1,000 modern masks, his hunger more insatiable than ever. In the sun-scorched lands of Canaan, amidst the acrid scent of burning olive wood and the heart-rending cries ripped from the throats of the innocent, Moloch's presence was visceral. His effigy, a monstrous figure of brass or iron, often depicted with the head of a bull, symbol of brute, unstoppable power, sat enthroned over roaring furnaces. His outstretched metal arms, heated to a dull, terrifying glow, awaited the ultimate offering, infants and children, placed upon them by their own parents, priests, or rulers to be consumed by the flames. This was not sacrifice born only of desperation in famine or plague, though those pressures existed. It was sacrifice offered from devotion, from a perverse understanding of duty and covenant. Kings seeking divine favor for conquest, merchants praying for safe passage across treacherous seas, commoners yearning for fertile fields, all bowed to his ravenous hunger. The fire was not merely ritualistic spectacle, it was a transaction, a brutal, unspoken pact. Give me what is most precious, most irreplaceable, and I will grant you power, security, prosperity. The smoke rising from the Tophet, the sacred precinct of sacrifice, its name itself meaning place of burning, was the incense of a terrible, systemic theology. A god of fire and iron, origins in the crucible of empire. The earliest, most chilling references to Moloch surface in the annals of the Hebrew Bible, a stark counter-narrative to the covenantal love demanded by Yahweh. Leviticus thunders condemnation. Do not give any of your children to be sacrificed to Moloch, for you must not profane the name of your God. Kings like Ahaz and Manasseh are damned for making their sons pass through the fire in the valley of Hinnom, Gehenna, a place later synonymous with hell itself. Archaeology and fragmentary histories from rival powers paint a corroborating grim picture. He is linked intrinsically to the Ammonites, Milcom, the Phoenicians, and most notoriously, the mercantile powerhouse of Carthage. In Carthage, the Tophet was not a hidden, shameful place, but a sprawling necropolis central to the city's identity. Thousands of urns containing the charred bones of children, predominantly firstborn sons of the elite, attest to the scale and institutionalization of the practice. Staley inscribed with dedications to Baal Hammon, often conflated or identified with Moloch, and Tanit, his consort, confirm the ritual's sacred purpose. To the Carthaginian senator watching his heir consumed, this wasn't the act of monsters, it was necessity. It was the grim arithmetic of survival and dominance. Offer the fruit of your loins, and the rains would come. The harvest would be bountiful. The enemy would falter. The ships would return laden with riches. Moloch crystallized the brutal, foundational belief that power demands suffering, that collective greatness, security, and favor are purchased only with the most profound individual loss. This wasn't mere isolated madness. It was systemic theology, the dark engine driving the machinery of state and faith. In demanding the future, children, for the present, power, Moloch revealed himself as perhaps the first true god of institutionalized power, the deity of the state apparatus willing to devour its own to perpetuate itself. The sacrificial machine, a perpetual engine of consumption. We stand millennia removed, cloaked in the arrogance of modernity, and tell ourselves we are distant from such primitive barbarity. We shudder at the thought of bronze arms and burning flesh, a profound, dangerous delusion. The machine dedicated to Moloch never ceased its grinding operation. It merely underwent a radical, insidious evolution. Its core function, the conversion of life force into systemic power, remains unchanged. It no longer demands infants placed literally on stone altars, though horrifying exceptions tragically persist. Instead, it feeds on more abstract, yet no less vital currencies: time, energy, attention, potential, youth, and futures. Consider the vast, global ritual of war. Young men and women, brimming with life and possibility, are mobilized, clad in uniforms, and dispatched to distant lands. The stated reasons: freedom, security, democracy, national interest, often ring hollow against the deafening machinery of geopolitical strategy, resource acquisition, and ideological dominance. Their bodies, broken and buried in foreign soil, their minds, scarred by trauma, their futures, abruptly extinguished. These are the offerings cast into the modern furnace. Each flag-draped coffin, each name etched on a memorial wall, is a sacrifice laid upon the altar of complex systems, military-industrial complexes, political ambitions, economic interests. Too vast, too diffuse, too deliberately obscured to be held truly accountable. The ruined psyche of the veteran, struggling in the shadows of a society that professes gratitude but offers scant meaningful support, is a burnt gift at the feet of the unseen God. We are told it is the price of our safety, our way of life. But the ledger, when examined coldly, reveals the same ancient equation: blood in, power out. The branding has changed: patriotism, duty, strategic necessity. But the underlying transaction, the feeding of Moloch, persists. Modern masks, capital, control, and the quiet compliance. Moloch thrives not in smoky temples, but in the sterile, fluorescent-lit corridors of boardrooms and bureaucracies. He is the algorithm optimizing for engagement at the cost of mental well-being. He is the unrelenting pressure of economic systems that prioritize quarterly profits and shareholder value above human dignity, environmental sustainability, or community health. Witness the for-profit prison industry, where human beings are reduced to revenue streams, incarceration rates meticulously calibrated to fill beds and generate returns. A literal commodification of suffering. See the education systems increasingly designed not to ignite curiosity, foster critical thought, or nurture holistic individuals, but to produce standardized, compliant units for the workforce, efficiently sorted and slotted, their unique sparks often dimmed or extinguished. Behold the healthcare systems, particularly stark in nations without universal care, where the ability to heal, or even to survive, comes tethered to a price tag that bankrupts families and forces impossible choices. Life itself held hostage to market forces. The machinery extracts life not through overt flames, but through stress-induced illness, through soul-crushing debt, through the slow erosion of hope. What was once the stark horror of fire and the hypnotic beat of ritual drums is now camouflaged as policy, procedure, market forces, and the way things work. The intent, however, remains chillingly constant: to extract life, time, vitality, potential, well-being, for the sake of perpetuating and expanding the system itself. Sacrifice is no longer a dramatic, communal spectacle. It is embedded, normalized, and individualized. We sacrifice precious hours with loved ones, childhoods witnessed only in fleeting moments, on the altar of relentless productivity and career advancement. We sacrifice mental health, enduring burnout, anxiety, and depression to meet impossible deadlines and crushing workloads. We sacrifice truth and integrity, swallowing convenient lies or remaining silent in the face of injustice for the sake of social acceptance, professional security, or simple, exhausting convenience. Moloch has become the operating system of modern global civilization, his code running silently in the background of our daily lives, demanding constant tribute. The god of the collective shadow, where empathy goes to die. Moloch transcends mere symbolism of external oppression. He is the terrifying embodiment of our collective shadow, the sum total of the darkness we disown, ignore, or project onto others. He manifests wherever empathy is systematically erased by the cold calculus of efficiency. He thrives where human beings are reduced from complex, feeling individuals to mere data points, statistics, human resources, consumers, or collateral damage in spreadsheets and strategic reports. He gains strength wherever our personal comfort, convenience, or privilege is knowingly or unknowingly purchased at the direct cost of another's suffering, be it the exploited worker in a distant factory, the marginalized community bearing the brunt of pollution, or the generations to come inheriting a depleted planet. We may no longer kneel physically before a burning statue, but we participate in Moloch's ritual daily. Each time we click "Buy Now," without considering the supply chain's human cost, each time we ignore the homeless person as an inconvenient reality, each time we justify exploitative business practices as necessary for competitiveness, each time we remain silent in the face of bigotry or systemic injustice because speaking up is uncomfortable or risky. In these moments, we cast our small offering into the invisible fire. He lives in the unexamined assumptions that underpin our institutions, that growth is infinite, that wealth equates to worth, that some lives are inherently more valuable than others. He resides in every habitual cruelty, from online anonymity fueling hatred to the bureaucratic indifference that crushes spirits. He is sustained by every compromise of our deeper values made to fit in, get ahead, or simply avoid conflict. Moloch is not a god requiring fervent faith. He is the god of default, of the path of least resistance, of the systems we inherit and perpetuate without conscious interrogation. He is the banality of evil, institutionalized, ritualized obedience, the comfortable comrades of the god. The most terrifying aspect of the modern Moloch is this: he no longer requires belief to thrive, only obedience. His altar is sustained not by fanatical worshippers chanting his name, but by the vast, quiet complicity of the multitude. Every time we shrug and mutter, "It's just business," as jobs are outsourced or communities devastated. Every time we trade our ethical compass for a promotion, a convenience, or social validation. Every time we look away from the uncomfortable truths, the climate data, the rising inequality, the erosion of rights, because confronting them feels too overwhelming. Every time we click "Agree" to labyrinthine terms of service that sell our data and attention, we perform a ritual of compliance. We follow rituals we don't remember consciously choosing. The 60-hour work week as a badge of honor, the relentless pursuit of consumption as a source of identity, the acceptance of pervasive surveillance as the price of security. We sign contracts, literal and societal, we never truly read or understood, binding ourselves and future generations to systems of debt, exploitation, and environmental degradation. We inherit systems, economic, political, social, we never fundamentally questioned, accepting their injustices and inefficiencies as immutable laws of nature. And thus, unaware, we become the priests of a god we claim not to believe in. diligently feeding the furnace we pretend doesn't exist. The fire still burns, invisible and omnipresent, fueled by our normalized sacrifices, our diverted gazes, our silent acquiescence. We are the keepers of the flame, the prophecy of resistance, starving the furnace. Yet Moloch is not omnipotent. His power, however vast and ancient, is parasitic. It feeds exclusively on specific fuels: fear that paralyzes, silence that enables, despair that disarms, and ignorance that blinds. He thrives in the shadows of unawareness and apathy. But shadows vanish when light is shone upon them. Awareness is his poison. Conscious refusal is his undoing. History, even amidst its darkest chapters, has always held space for those who dared to stand against the Moloch of their age. The prophets of old, who railed against the idolatry of power and the sacrifice of the poor. The rebels who rose against tyrannical systems demanding their flesh and spirit. The heretics who challenged dogmas that justified cruelty. The abolitionists who tore at the chains of human chattel slavery. The whistleblowers who risked everything to expose hidden crimes of state and corporation. The activists on the front lines of civil rights, environmental justice, and human dignity. These are the ones who looked into the furnace and said, "No more." They refused to sacrifice others or themselves for the comfort, control, or empire of the few. They often paid a terrible price: exile, imprisonment, torture, death, character assassination, or simply the crushing weight of indifference. Yet their defiance itself burned brighter than the fires of the altar they challenged. In that fierce, uncompromising light, others glimpsed the monstrous machinery for what it was and saw a path out of the darkness. Their courage, their willingness to bear the cost of saying no, became a beacon, proving that the god's hunger can be denied, that the machine can be disrupted. Resistance is not futile. It is the only force that has ever truly diminished Moloch's reach. Personal refraction. Where does the shadow fall on you? This exploration is not merely an academic exercise in ancient myth or a grand social metaphor. It is, fundamentally, a mirror. Moloch exists concretely in the unjust systems we serve, often unknowingly, through our labor, our consumption, our votes, and our silence. He manifests in every time we trade our core values: compassion, integrity, truth, for external validation, security, or fleeting advantage. The critical question is not whether Moloch exists in our world. The undeniable evidence of persistent systemic suffering and exploitation answers that. The piercing personal question is, where do you meet him? In your job? Do you contribute to a system that exploits labor, harms the environment, or prioritizes profit over people? Do you sacrifice your health, relationships, or ethics on the altar of career advancement, or simply keeping the job? In your silence, where do you see injustice, large or small, and choose not to speak, not to act, because it's easier, safer, or not your problem? In your ambition, what lines are you willing to cross? What principles are you willing to bend to achieve your goals? Who might be trampled in your ascent, in your consumption? Do you know the true cost of the goods you buy? Do you feed corporations that engage in unethical practices, environmental destruction, or labor exploitation because it's cheaper or more convenient? In your comfort, how much of your ease depends on the unseen suffering or disadvantage of others, locally or globally? How willing are you to examine and potentially disrupt that comfort? To starve a god like Moloch, we must first cease being his priests. We must withdraw our consent, our energy, our passive participation. This begins not with grand revolutions necessarily, but with daily, conscious acts of refusal within our sphere of influence. The new covenant, from sacrificial altar to sanctuary of consciousness. We do not require new gods or grand utopian schemes to escape Moloch's grasp. We need new agreements, forged consciously and collectively. We must strive to build a world foundationally different from the sacrificial logic that has dominated. A world not predicated on extraction and consumption, but on regeneration and care. A world that does not feed on the futures of the young, the marginalized, or the planet, but actively nurtures and protects them. This vision of mutual aid, ecological stewardship, equitable distribution, and profound respect for inherent human dignity is the absolute antithesis of Moloch. And this transformation begins, irrevocably, with awakening. Waking up to the systems we inhabit, the sacrifices we make and demand, and the true cost of our comfort and complacency. Awareness is the first, essential rebellion. It is the fire that does not consume life, but reveals the hidden mechanisms of consumption. It illuminates the chains, making them visible and therefore breakable. And love, not a passive sentiment, but fierce, active compassion, is the sword that severs Moloch's grip. Compassion that extends beyond our immediate circle to encompass the stranger, the enemy, the exploited, the voiceless, and the generations yet unborn. Compassion that translates into action, into solidarity, into building alternatives. It demands immense courage to turn away from a God that whispers seductive promises of power, security, and belonging in exchange for complicity. To say no to the system, to the career path, to the convenient lie, to the normalized exploitation often carries a cost. But history's enduring narrative, beneath the roar of empires and the groan of oppressive machinery, belongs to those who break the chain, to those who turn their backs on the seductive, consuming fire and face instead the uncertain, demanding, but infinitely more hopeful dawn. The final question: what will you feed? So, look into the mirror Moloch holds up. Ask yourself with ruthless honesty, where in your life have you mistaken sacrifice for success? Where have you confused endurance under exploitation for noble perseverance? Where have you bowed, perhaps unknowingly, to a system that feeds on the innocent, the vulnerable, the future itself? Moloch still feeds. His furnace burns as hot as ever. But its fuel source is not divine mandate. It is human choice, human energy, human complicity, and human despair. The flames are sustained by our participation, our diverted gaze, our normalized sacrifices. It's time to turn off the fire. It begins with seeing it. It continues with naming it. It endures with refusing to feed it. And it culminates in building something new, something nourishing, something worthy of the precious, irreplaceable life that Moloch has claimed for millennia. The choice, ultimately, is stark. Continue feeding the god, or starve him by choosing, fiercely and consciously, to nurture life instead. What will you feed?